your last book in that sort of trilogy that Russell deems it, the People Know, of course, the subtitle of that is A Brief History of Antipopulism. And
which a word that I thought I had invented, by the way, until I was almost done with the book. Antipopulism. I thought that that was like I was going to add that to the culture, right? And then I discovered when I was almost done that other people had in fact written about it before. So I wasn't the inventor of that idea, but I think I'm the first one to like sketch out the history of it, where it comes from, how it came to be so universal. And most importantly, I think how the good old American left-wing tradition of populism has just been so traduced in recent years, and badmouthed so unfairly, and so ridiculously, But anyhow, but yes, that's what I'm sorry. I forgot what you asked me.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
He didn't yet.
Well, to me, I didn't ask it yet, but to me, I mean, anti-populist rhetoric also always sort of struck me as anti-democratic rhetoric, democratic small d. Which is why
it's the fear of the people. It's
the fear of people having a voice and having that voice influence political decisions. To me, that's what democracy is, right? So all these people fretting about populism, really, they're really fretting about democracy and democratic outcomes.
And that goes all the way back to the founding of the country. I mean, if you go back and look at the founders, the only two of them were like even marginally supportive of democracy. Franklin and Jefferson, and the others hated it. The others were like, no, that's really dangerous. That's like the worst thing in the world. And as we all know, Jefferson only believed in it in theory, anyhow. But then of course the French Revolution was for about a century was everybody's idea of what happens if you let the people actually have a say. They do crazy shit. They go wild. And so when populism came along, in the 19th century was the politics of it all over the world were driven by this fear that if you don't look out, you're going to have a kind of Robespierre reign of terror situation all over again. So you got to keep a lid on that thing. And when populism happened in the 1890s, it just scared the hell out of the sort of ruling class of the United States, and
that's what you call the democracy scare. That's what.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm sorry, I haven't looked at that book for a while. That's a good term. I like that because democracy scares happen. They happen again and again and again. And in our national life, and you had it again in the 1930s. Almost like note for note. A cover version of the attack on populism in the 1890s, but this time it's an attack on Roosevelt and the New Deal. And the great thing about the 30s is that the good guys won that time, so they couldn't stop them. But nowadays, this anti-populism is like it's everywhere you go, and especially among European political scientists. Now, I have no idea how they managed to conquer, political discourse here in America, but somehow they did. And, they have flipped the meaning of the word populism from being a good thing, a noble thing, which when I was coming up, that's what maybe that's my Kansas upbringing. We thought that populism was, everybody knew populism was the good guys, right? But now it's supposed to be, evil, insane. It's like Donald Trump, it's fascist, it's proto-fascism, anyhow.
Well, yeah, I mean, in 2016, all this fretting that Donald Trump represented this existential threat to democracy always rang hollow to me, because it seemed like every institution of consolidated capital and consolidated power was on the blue team that year. And it was the ordinary people, disproportionately people without four-year college degrees, so people without inroads to those institutions who voted for Trump. So it struck me as an entirely democratic outcome, a far more democratic outcome than had the Democrats won that year.
There, I have a complexion now.
You have a little color. Yeah.
Well, I don't like Trump, didn't vote for Trump. but you're certainly right about all the powers being aligned with the Democratic Party that year, and it was really disturbing. And it's I mean, we're in new territory in this country. We're in really uncharted territory. I mean, all my life, the powers that be were aligned with the Republicans.
Right.
That's always the way it's been. For me, the influential period was the late 70s and the early 80s. And, Ronald Reagan had everything behind him. And they've all, Wall Street, right? Silicon Valley back then were these libertarians. They're the great theorist of Silicon Valley. This is later on, but was a guy called George Gilder, he's one of the great theorists of Silicon Valley. And he actually was very influential in the Reagan White House. Everything has changed sides, it feels like. Right. And it's a very strange and disorienting time. At the same time, I don't really want to talk about I'm sure you guys will want to talk about the present. I think there's a very real chance that Trump is going to win again. And I think it's really, frightening because one of the things that was interesting about his presidency is for all those fears that the liberals had in 2016, he didn't do anything. He was totally incompetent as president. The dude couldn't figure out anything. Couldn't find his ass with both hands, right?
He couldn't even start World War III. That's how incompetent he was.
Well, there's all these stories, right? Like he tried to pull out of Afghanistan and the generals tricked him. Do you know about this stuff? It's crazy. The guy was just like, he had no idea what he was doing. He would fire people on Twitter. He was, but I think that if he gets in again, I think we really should be worried. I think he won't screw it up quite so badly next time around. But you're absolutely right. That description of 2016. And what's amazing to me is that the Democratic Party, with a few exceptions here and there, can't figure out what's gone wrong. They can't understand it. But when I say Democratic Party, I want to throw in there like the pundit core of America, such as they are. They're in a dying industry, but they still exist. The people who make opinion in this country, they don't understand it. They can't understand it. And basically, I spent the last 20 years trying to explain it to them, right? And it's just utterly pointless. You can't get through. They don't listen. They don't care. They don't read history, and and now they're faced with this kind of catastrophe, and they can't figure it out. They just it's totally bewildering to them.
Well, let me pitch this as your one of your final books. I don't know. Are you still writing books? Are you working on a book?
I am, but it's not a political book. By the way, I should say to you, it's such a relief. I'm writing about something completely removed from all of this stuff, and it's so refreshing. Before I wrote about politics, I wrote about creativity, not like in the stupid sense. I mean, like in the critical sense. And this is my first book was about what was called the creative revolution in advertising in the 1960s.
Ah, right.
So I knew all about the advertising.
Right. That came out of your thesis, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I believe it's to this day the only secondhand historical account of Madison Avenue in the 1960s. There's lots of memoirs about it, but this is the only actual historical account of it. And then I somehow got from that into politics, which is a long story. But then all this stuff has been going on. It's very disheartening to me, as I would write these books that I felt were more and more and more on target. Like you read Listen Liberal, right? And you read The People Know. And I was getting progressively more and more nowhere. You know what I'm saying?
Because they're stupid. What? That's why it was called Listen Liberal.
Exactly.
Listen Bitch. That should have been your book. You should write the next book called Listen Bitch. That should be your next one. No, but honestly, your next one should be What's the Matter with Park Slope? What's the matter with the Upper West Side?
No, that's what it was, right? That's what it was.
Well, because that's kind of What's the Matter with Kansas was kind of about. Like what happened to the middle of the country and why.
That's my neighborhood. Right. That's where I grew up. I grew up in this very wealthy part of Kansas City in the Kansas side, in Johnson County, Kansas. And my neighbors when I was a kid were the most Republican people I thought that I would ever meet, right? It's like people they adored Bob Dole. the governor of Kansas lived in the neighborhood. He didn't even live in Topeka. He lived in my neighborhood. He didn't want to live, because Kansas City has restaurants and whatnot, and it was, these were like very, very, very Republican people. I was there for the 2020 election. And hiding out from the coronavirus and doing this and that, and I after the election was over, Johnson County went Democratic for the first time since 1912. This is
right. You mentioned
Kansas.
I remember that.
And my neighborhood specifically, this very, very wealthy part of it went Biden won every single precinct. Now this is the ruling elite of Kansas City we're talking about. This is the ruling class of the state of Kansas. This is them. And they went almost unanimously for this guy. It's a Democrat. It's unthinkable. When I was a kid, that would have been absolutely, this is happening everywhere.
Please clap.